Laura had always dreamed of a love story that felt like magic, and when she met Adam, it was exactly that. He wasn't just handsome, he was charming, kind, and unbelievably wealthy. Adam came from a family of power and influence, the kind of people who lived in grand mansions with marble floors and gold chandeliers. But to Laura, none of that mattered. She loved Adam for who he was, not for his money. Their love story was like a beautiful dream. Adam took her on private jet trips to exotic islands, where they walked on white sandy beaches and watched the sunset from luxury yachts. They dined in the most expensive restaurants, where the plates were made of fine porcelain and the meals were crafted by world-class chefs. Laura felt like the luckiest woman in the world. When Adam proposed, it was nothing short of a fairy tale. He rented out an entire glass-walled restaurant on top of the tallest building in the city. With the skyline glittering beneath them, he got down on one knee, holding a diamond ring so large it sparkled like a star. "Laura, you are my heart, my soul, my everything. Marry me," Adam said, his eyes filled with love. Tears of joy streamed down her face. Yes. 1,000,000 times yes. The news spread fast. Social media exploded with pictures of the glamorous proposal. News outlets covered the engagement, calling it the love story of the century. Laura couldn't believe how perfect her life had become. She was marrying the man she loved, and nothing could go wrong. Their wedding was breathtaking. Held in an ancient castle-turned-hotel, it was a lavish event attended by politicians, celebrities, and business moguls. Laura wore a dress made of the finest silk, with delicate diamonds stitched into the fabric. The wedding aisle was covered in fresh rose petals, and an orchestra played soft music in the background. As she walked towards Adam, her heart raced with happiness. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when she reached him. Their vows were full of promises: love, loyalty, and forever. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the entire hall erupted into cheers. Fireworks exploded outside, lighting up the night sky. After the wedding, they moved into Adam's futuristic smart home, a mansion equipped with artificial intelligence that controlled everything, from the temperature of the rooms to the security drones that guarded the gates. It was the kind of life most people could only dream of. "I can't wait to start our forever," Laura said, snuggling into Adam's arms that night. "Me neither," he murmured, kissing her forehead. She felt safe, cherished. But little did she know, this happiness was about to be shattered by a force more powerful than she ever imagined: Jane, Adam's mother. Laura had heard about Jane before, but nothing prepared her for their first meeting. She and Adam had just returned from their honeymoon in the Maldives, and Adam wanted to introduce her properly to his mother. "She's a little traditional, but she'll come around," he assured Laura as they drove towards Jane's estate. The estate was more like a kingdom. Towering gates, endless gardens, and a mansion that looked more like a palace. Inside, everything gleamed with wealth: golden staircases, priceless artwork, and floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. And at the center of it all stood Jane. She was a tall woman, elegant and poised, dressed in a custom-designed gown. Her presence demanded respect, but there was something in her sharp gaze that made Laura uneasy. "So you're the woman my son married," Jane said, her voice smooth but cold. "Yes, ma'am." "It's so nice to meet you," Laura said with a warm smile, extending her hand. Jane didn't take it. Instead, she gave her a slow, assessing look. "I had hoped my son would marry someone suitable," she said, her lips curving into a fake smile. Laura felt the sting of those words. Adam laughed nervously. "Mom, Laura's my wife now. I love her." Jane's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Of course," she said. "We'll see how long that lasts." A chill ran down Laura's spine. It was in that moment she realized this woman was not going to welcome her with open arms. And she was right. From that day forward, Jane made it her mission to make Laura's life miserable. She started small. Subtle jabs here and there. "Are you sure you know how to handle a house like this?" A girl from a modest background might struggle, she'd say with a fake laugh. She would send the housemaids away and then make Laura serve tea to guests like a servant. When they had family gatherings, Jane would introduce Laura to people as Adam's temporary wife. Worst of all, she started poisoning Adam's mind. "Laura doesn't respect me," she told him one evening. "She doesn't understand our family's traditions." At first, Adam defended Laura. "Mom, Laura's trying. Please give her a chance." But Jane didn't stop. Day after day she whispered lies into Adam's ears. She's only with you for your money. She doesn't respect your family. She's making you weak, Adam. And slowly, Laura began to see a change in her husband. At first it was small things. Adam would come home late and barely talk to her. When she tried to hold his hand, he would pull away. Then came the arguments. Laura, why are you always complaining about my mother? Adam snapped one night. Because she treats me like I don't belong here. Laura said, her voice shaking. Maybe you don't, Adam muttered under his breath. Laura's heart shattered. This wasn't the man she married. She wanted to fight back, but how do you fight against a mother's hold on her son? That night, as she lay in their massive bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized something chilling. If she didn't do something soon, Jane would take Adam away from her completely. But Laura wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She would fight. She just needed a plan. The mansion was cold. Not because of the temperature. No, the state-of-the-art climate control system kept every room at the perfect warmth. It was cold because Jane's presence sucked the warmth out of everything. Laura had been in the house for a month now, and each day felt like a battle. Jane had made it clear. This was her kingdom. And Laura? Just an outsider. Laura could see the way Jane worked. She didn't scream, didn't throw tantrums. No, she was too smart for that. Instead, she spread her poison quietly, like a slow-acting venom, until it seeped into Adam's mind completely. Adam, dear, you seem so stressed, Jane said one evening as they all sat for dinner. Adam sighed, rubbing his temples. Work has been a lot, Mom. Or maybe it's your wife, Jane said sweetly. Laura's fork froze midair. Excuse me. Jane ignored her and continued, ever since you married, you've been so different. You used to be more focused, more ambitious. Mom, Jane placed a gentle hand on Adam's arm, her voice soft. I just want what's best for you, sweetheart. A strong woman elevates her husband, she doesn't slow him down. Laura felt her chest tighten. She wanted to scream, to tell Adam not to fall for it. But she could already see it, the doubt in his eyes. The hesitation. Jane was winning. Laura tried to fight back in her own way. She made Adam's favorite meals, hoping to remind him of their love. But Jane would swoop in and say things like, oh honey, I had the chef prepare a much healthier version for you. Laura's cooking is too basic for someone of your status. She dressed in elegant outfits, trying to match the standard of high society. But Jane would glance at her and say, oh dear, that color makes you look a little washed out. But don't worry, we can find something more fitting for you. She tried to join in family conversations, but Jane always changed the topic or ignored her completely. The worst part. Adam said nothing. At night, Laura lay in their enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Adam breathe beside her. They were inches apart, yet it felt like miles. Do you still love me? She whispered one night. Adam turned to her, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Laura, don't start this. Just tell me, she pleaded. Of course I do, he muttered. But the words felt empty. Panical. Laura swallowed back tears. She was losing him. Jane's attacks weren't just private. She wanted to destroy Laura's reputation too. One evening, Jane hosted a lavish charity gala. The city's most powerful people were there. CEOs, politicians, and elite socialites. Laura knew it was important, so she wore an elegant designer dress, ready to represent Adam proudly. But Jane had other plans. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane said, raising a glass. Before we begin, I just want to introduce someone very special. My new daughter-in-law, Laura. The spotlight turned on Laura. She smiled nervously as people clapped politely. Jane continued, now my dear Laura didn't grow up in high society, so she's still learning our ways. But don't worry, I'm personally training her. A few guests chuckled. Laura's stomach twisted. And of course, Jane went on, she has such a kind heart. Just last week she tried to help the maids with their chores, because she thought that was her job. Laughter erupted across the hall. Laura's face burned with humiliation. She looked at Adam, begging him with her eyes to say something. But he just sat there silent. That was the moment Laura knew she was alone. That night, Laura stormed into their bedroom, shaking with rage. How could you let her humiliate me like that? She demanded. Adam sighed. Laura, it was just a joke. A joke. Adam, she's turning you against me. You're overreacting, he muttered, loosening his tie. Laura stared at him, heart pounding. Do you even love me anymore? Adam exhaled. Laura, I don't have time for this. My mother is just trying to help. Maybe if you listen to her instead of fighting all the time. Laura took a step back, feeling like she had been slapped. Unbelievable, she whispered. Adam rubbed his forehead. Can we not do this right now? Laura felt something inside her snap. Fine. If Jane wanted a battle, Laura would give her one, but she wouldn't fight the way Jane expected. No, she would play the perfect daughter-in-law. She would earn Jane's trust, and when the time was right, she would bring her down. Laura had spent weeks crying herself to sleep. Weeks waiting for Adam to wake up and see what his mother was doing. Weeks hoping things would change. But hope was a foolish thing in Jane's world. So Laura wiped her tears and made a decision. She wouldn't fight Jane head-on. That was what the woman wanted. No, Laura would do the unthinkable. She would play along. The next morning, she walked into the grand dining hall where Jane sat with her usual elegance, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup. Good morning, Mother, Laura said sweetly. Jane raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Mother? Laura smiled. I realized I've been doing everything wrong. I've been resisting your guidance instead of learning from you. A slow smile spread across Jane's face. Oh, so you finally understand how things work in this family? Yes, Laura said, keeping her voice soft. Teach me how to be the perfect wife for Adam. Teach me how to be like you. Jane studied her, eyes sharp like a hawk searching for weakness. But Laura had no cracks in her mask. Very well, Jane said smoothly. Let's begin. Jane wasted no time turning Laura into her personal puppet. Polish my jewelry. Learn how to walk like a lady. Your voice is too common. Speak softly. Massage my feet. I have an important event tonight. Laura obeyed every order without complaint. She cooked Jane's favorite meals, memorized her favorite brands, and even learned how to serve tea the exact way Jane liked it. 1 sugar cube, a splash of milk, stirred clockwise 3 times. Adam, seeing Laura's sudden obedience, smiled for the first time in weeks. See, Mom? I told you Laura would fit in. Jane smirked, satisfied. Yes, dear. She's learning. Laura smiled back, but inside she was planning her next move. The mansion's workers, maids, drivers, and security guards, had seen many wives come and go. They knew Jane's tricks. At first they kept their distance from Laura, expecting her to break like the others. But Laura was different. She spoke to them with kindness. She remembered their names, asked about their families. She helped the maids carry heavy trays when no one was watching. She listened when the chef ranted about Jane's impossible food demands. Slowly the staff grew to love her. And one by one they started whispering secrets. Mrs. Jane has cameras everywhere. She watches everything. She keeps all the family documents in the red study room. No one is allowed inside. She has ruined every woman who ever tried to marry Mr. Adam. You're the 4th wife. Laura's blood turned cold. 4th. She had never heard about Adam being married before. What happened to the others? Laura asked. A maid hesitated, then whispered, they left. But not before Jane destroyed their reputations. One was accused of stealing. Another was painted as a gold digger. The 3rd. The maid swallowed hard. She ended up in a mental institution. Laura's hands clenched into fists. Jane didn't just destroy marriages. She destroyed lives. But not this time. Laura wouldn't be another casualty. Now that Laura had the staff on her side, she needed to shake Jane's control. Her first move. One night she walked into their bedroom in a silk nightgown, her hair cascading down her shoulders. Adam looked up from his tablet, surprised. Hey, he said. You look beautiful. Laura smiled and sat beside him. Do you remember when we used to stay up all night talking? Adam chuckled. Yeah. You'd never let me sleep. She reached for his hand. I miss us, Adam. His face softened. I do too. Laura leaned in. Then let's go away for the weekend. Just the 2 of us. Somewhere far from here. For a moment she saw it. The old Adam. The man who once adored her, but then his expression changed. He pulled his hand away. I can't, he muttered. Why not? My mother has a charity event this weekend. She needs me there. Laura's heart sank. Jane had won again, but she forced a smile. Of course. You're right. She wouldn't push. Not yet, but soon Adam would see the truth. The final step of Laura's plan required something dangerous. A secret powerful enough to destroy Jane. And for that she needed access to the red study room. One evening Jane left for a dinner party. Laura, pretending to be the obedient wife, smiled and waved goodbye. The moment Jane's car was gone, she moved. She had bribed one of the maids to unlock the study room before Jane left. Now she had 30 minutes before the security cameras turned back on. The study was as grand as the rest of the house, filled with expensive books, paintings, and a massive desk. Laura didn't waste time. She searched through drawers, cabinets, anything that could give her an advantage, then she found it. A thick folder labeled "Confidential." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were records of Jane's darkest secrets. Hidden bank accounts, blackmailed officials, proof that she had manipulated Adam's previous wives into ruin. Laura gasped. This was it. This was the weapon she needed. Then, Laura? She froze. Adam stood in the doorway, frowning. "What are you doing in my mother's study?" he asked. Laura's heart pounded. If he saw what she had in her hands, it was over. So she did the only thing she could. She turned, smiled, and said, "I was looking for a pen." Laura's hands tightened around the folder as Adam took a step forward. She needed to think fast, so she smiled and turned to face him completely. "I was looking for a pen," she said, keeping her voice light. Adam's eyes flicked to the open drawers, the slightly displaced papers, the tension in her shoulders. Her heart pounded as she watched him, waiting for a reaction. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Laura, you can't be in here. My mother doesn't like anyone touching her things." Laura forced a small laugh, closing the folder slowly and placing it back on the desk. I know, I needed to write something down for the chef. She asked what we wanted for dinner tomorrow, and I didn't want to forget." She picked up a random pen from the table and held it up like proof, then stepped forward, brushing past him gently. Adam hesitated, then exhaled. "Just don't come in here again. If my mother finds out, she'll be furious." Laura nodded, keeping her face neutral as she walked out. Inside, her pulse raced. That was too close. She had almost been caught. But she wasn't done. Now that she knew where Jane kept her secrets, she just needed the right moment to use them. The next day, she played her role perfectly. She massaged Jane's shoulders when she complained of stress, complimented her in front of guests, even helped select her jewelry for an upcoming event. Jane basked in the attention, unaware that Laura was listening to every word she said, memorizing her weaknesses. Laura began planting small seeds of doubt around the house. She whispered to the maids about a hidden scandal from Jane's past, making sure they repeated it in hushed tones near the kitchen, knowing Jane's spies would report back. She casually mentioned to Adam that she overheard someone saying his mother might not be as respected as she claimed. She let these small cracks spread, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as they all sat for dinner in the grand dining hall, Laura made her first real move. "Mother, I heard something very interesting today," she said, keeping her tone innocent. Jane barely looked up from her glass of wine. "Yes, dear." Laura glanced at Adam before continuing. "A woman at the boutique was talking about an old scandal in the city's elite circles. Something about a powerful matron who ruined a few marriages to keep control over her son. Isn't that funny?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Jane's grip on her wine glass tightened slightly, but she forced a smile. "People gossip, Laura. It's usually nonsense." Laura nodded as if she agreed, but she had seen it. The flicker of unease in Jane's eyes, the way her shoulders stiffened. Adam frowned, glancing between them. "What scandal?" he asked. Jane waved a hand dismissively. "It's nothing, darling." But Laura had achieved what she wanted. She had planted the idea in Adam's mind. Now all she had to do was water it. The next week, Laura waited until Jane left for a social event. Then, with the help of a trusted maid, she returned to the study and took pictures of the documents she found. Proof of Jane's hidden accounts, records of bribes, and most importantly, letters from the families of Adam's past wives. Pleas for justice, threats to expose her, all of which had been silenced. That night, as Adam lay in bed beside her, Laura placed her phone in his hands. "Read this," she whispered. Adam scrolled through the photos, confusion turning to horror as he pieced it all together. This can't be real," he muttered. Laura reached for his hand. "It is. Your mother has been controlling your life for years, Adam. She's the reason your marriages failed. She's the reason we've been fighting. She wants to destroy me too." Adam's face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. He opened his mouth to deny it, but the evidence was too strong. He looked at her and for the first time in months really looked at her. Laura, his voice cracked. Laura swallowed the lump in her throat. Adam, I love you. But if you don't believe me, if you choose her over me after this, then I can't stay. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the mansion's smart system. Adam's grip on the phone tightened. He had always been his mother's puppet, but now, faced with the truth, he had a choice to make. Down the hall, Jane returned from her event, stepping into her home with her usual confidence, unaware that her empire was crumbling. Adam sat frozen, staring at the evidence on Laura's phone. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his hands trembled slightly. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the weight of betrayal. Laura had just shown him everything. Proof that his mother had manipulated him for years, proof that every woman before her had been ruined, proof that Jane had never truly wanted him to be happy. The realization was sinking in, and she could see the war raging inside him. He wanted to deny it, to push it away, but the evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too real. Footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp, precise, filled with authority. Jane entered the room with her usual grace, her expensive gown flowing behind her, her diamond earrings catching the light. She had always carried herself like a queen, like someone untouchable, someone above consequences. She stopped when she saw the tension in the air, her sharp eyes scanning the scene, immediately recognizing that something was off. She looked at Adam first, then at Laura, her gaze narrowing slightly before she spoke in that soft, calculating voice. Adam, darling, what's wrong? Adam didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning white. His mother's voice had always soothed him, had always held power over him, but tonight, something was different. Jane's expression remained calm, but Laura saw the flicker of hesitation, the smallest crack in her carefully crafted mask. She already knew. She could sense that her empire was crumbling. Laura inhaled deeply and stood up, locking eyes with Jane. I showed him the truth, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jane tilted her head slightly, feigning ignorance, but Laura saw the way her fingers clenched ever so slightly at her sides. What truth? Jane asked, her tone light but her body tense. Adam finally spoke, his voice hoarse, hollow. The hidden accounts. The bribes. The letters from the families of my ex-wives. The way you destroyed every woman who tried to love me. His words came out slow, measured, as if saying them out loud made them more real. For the first time in years, Jane looked unsettled. It was brief, just a flicker of emotion before she regained her composure. She let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head as if disappointed. Oh, Adam, please. You know how people love to gossip. Powerful women like me are always targeted. People will say anything out of jealousy. You can't seriously believe these lies. Laura clenched her fists, but she forced herself to remain still, to let Adam process it on his own. If she pushed too hard, Jane would use it against her, make it seem like Laura was the manipulator, the one poisoning his mind. Jane stepped forward, her voice dropping into something softer, more persuasive, the same voice she had used to control him his whole life. Darling, I did everything for you. Everything. You wouldn't be where you are without me. I protected you from women who only wanted your wealth, your status. I made sure you were safe. Her eyes flicked to Laura, the fake warmth in her expression vanishing. I protected you from women like her. Laura expected the attack, but it still stung. She had spent years proving her love for Adam, and in a single sentence Jane had reduced her to nothing more than a threat, an outsider. But she didn't react, didn't give Jane the satisfaction of a response. Instead she turned to Adam, waiting, praying. Adam closed his eyes briefly before exhaling, his shoulders heavy with the weight of realization. No, Mother, he said, his voice steadier this time. You didn't protect me. You controlled me. You ruined my relationships. You made me doubt my own choices. You kept me trapped and I let you. Jane's mask cracked, her lips parting slightly in shock. Adam, No, he interrupted, standing up so fast that his chair scraped against the marble floor. Enough. I've let you control me my whole life. I ignored things I shouldn't have, justified your actions because I thought you were just looking out for me, but I see it now. You didn't want me to be happy, you wanted to keep me under your thumb. And I won't let you anymore. Laura could hardly breathe. She had dreamed of this moment, had prayed for Adam to finally see the truth, but she had never truly believed it would happen. Yet here he was, standing up to the woman who had controlled him for decades. Jane's hands curled into fists, her composed exterior beginning to shatter. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice no longer sweet, no longer calm. It was cold, sharp, filled with barely contained fury. "You think she loves you? She loves what you can give her. The moment things go wrong, she'll leave." Adam shook his head. "The only person who has ever tried to use me is you." Jane's eyes filled with something unreadable, anger, betrayal, maybe even pain. For the first time she looked almost human, like a mother who had just lost her son. But Jane was too proud to beg, too proud to admit defeat. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin and turned toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked away, her presence fading like a storm retreating into the distance. The house felt different, lighter, quieter. For years, Jane had filled every room with her influence, her expectations, her rules. Now for the first time it felt like a home instead of a prison. Adam exhaled shakily and turned to Laura. His eyes were filled with so many emotions: guilt, sadness, relief. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice breaking. Laura reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You don't have to apologize. We're free now." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Jane may have lost the battle, but women like her didn't simply disappear. She had been humiliated, cast aside, but she wasn't defeated. Not completely. In the weeks that followed, the city's elite whispered about what had happened. Some saw Jane as the victim, a powerful woman betrayed by her own son. Others saw the truth, saw her for what she really was. Some allies abandoned her, but others remained loyal, waiting for the day she would rise again. And Laura knew, Jane wasn't finished. She had been forced into the shadows, but shadows were where people like Jane thrived. She would watch, she would wait, and when the time was right she would strike again. But Laura wasn't afraid. She had fought once and she had won. If Jane ever tried to come back, to take back control, to reclaim her throne, Laura would be ready.